louder than 1,000 words. They are not dramatic or obvious, yet somehow they carry a strange emotional weight. A moment of eye contact that lasts just a second longer than normal. A smile that seems to hold something unspoken. A simple message whose tone feels slightly different from before. These moments may look small on the surface, but sometimes they reveal that something underneath has begun to change. And often they mark the beginning of an emotional story that neither person consciously planned. What happens when a married man starts looking at another woman in a different way? This isn't about scandal, accusations, or moral judgment. It's about understanding human behavior and the complicated emotional patterns that appear when something begins shifting beneath the surface of an existing relationship. Because attraction does not always begin with a decision to betray someone. Sometimes it begins with a quiet emptiness. Sometimes it grows from needs that have gone unspoken for too long. And sometimes it appears when loneliness exists inside a relationship that, from the outside, looks completely normal. The man may not leave his home searching for another emotional connection. He may not be planning anything at all. He might not even understand what he is feeling. Then, unexpectedly, something happens. Maybe it's in a workplace break room, during a meeting, or while passing through a hallway. A normal conversation with a colleague suddenly feels different. She listens carefully. She laughs naturally. She seems genuinely interested in what he has to say. For a moment, he feels noticed, and something inside him that has been quiet for a long time begins to wake up. Pay attention to this, because the shift usually doesn't happen all at once. It develops slowly, almost invisibly, until the ordinary starts feeling emotionally charged. The movement from simple acquaintance to emotionally meaningful interaction is rarely sudden. It usually happens little by little. Almost like a whisper becoming a voice. His tone becomes warmer. His attention becomes more focused. His eyes stay on you slightly longer. Conversations that once existed only for practical reasons begin carrying an emotional layer. The words may remain ordinary, but the feeling underneath them becomes different. A discussion about work suddenly includes personal questions. A quick greeting becomes a longer conversation. A passing comment becomes something he remembers later. And if you are the woman noticing these changes, you may find yourself trapped inside a strange kind of uncertainty. You start asking yourself questions. Am I imagining this? Am I reading too much into his behavior? Was that look actually meaningful, or was it just a normal moment? This is where things become complicated, because intuition often notices patterns before the conscious mind can explain them. You may not have proof of anything. You may not even be certain that he understands what is happening inside himself. But you can sense that the emotional atmosphere has changed, and that uncertainty can be powerful. It makes you examine every conversation, every smile, every pause. So here is something important to remember. One isolated behavior does not automatically prove attraction. People can be warm, friendly, attentive, and expressive without having romantic intentions. What matters is the pattern. When several small behaviors repeatedly appear together, they can reveal that the connection is becoming more emotionally significant. And that is where the story becomes much more interesting. One of the earliest signs can be found in communication. His words may begin to sound softer. There may be a pause before he answers you, almost as if he is choosing his words more carefully. His voice may become gentler. He may laugh more easily around you, pay closer attention to what you say, or remember details that most people would forget. Even when the conversation is about something completely practical, the emotional tone can feel different. This does not necessarily mean he has consciously decided that he wants something more. In many situations, attraction begins before a person has fully admitted it to himself. He may simply find himself enjoying the interaction more than he expected. He may look forward to seeing you. He may notice when you are absent. He may unconsciously create small opportunities for another conversation. This is where communication becomes more than communication. It becomes a subtle way of creating emotional closeness. The two of you may develop little references, familiar jokes, certain expressions, or a style of talking that feels unique to your interactions. Nothing explicit has to be said. In fact, the absence of direct words can sometimes make the emotional tension stronger. There is a kind of private atmosphere created between two people when they repeatedly give each other focused attention. It can feel like a small emotional world existing inside a much larger one. And if you have ever wondered why a completely ordinary conversation suddenly feels different with one particular person, this may be part of the reason. The words are not necessarily special. The emotional meaning attached to them is. Compliments can become another subtle clue. At first, they may sound completely harmless. You look nice today. You always have interesting ideas. You explain things really well. You have a great sense of humor. On their own, these comments mean very little. But context matters. Pay attention to how often they happen, what he notices, and whether the compliments become increasingly personal. A general compliment may simply be kindness. A repeated pattern of carefully chosen observations can suggest something more emotionally focused. Perhaps he notices small changes in your appearance that other people overlook. Perhaps he remembers something you mentioned weeks ago. Perhaps he finds reasons to tell you that he appreciates your personality, your way of thinking, or the way you make him feel comfortable. And then there is the moment after the compliment, the eye contact, the small smile, the pause. Sometimes the meaning is less in the words themselves and more in everything surrounding them. He may not simply be praising you. He may be showing that he has started paying unusually close attention to you. This is one of those moments where you should resist the temptation to jump immediately to a conclusion. Attraction is possible, but it is not guaranteed. The real clue is consistency. Does he behave this way only once, or does the same pattern continue over time? Does he treat everyone this way, or does his behavior noticeably change around you? Does he seek your attention even when there is no practical reason to do so? Those differences matter, because emotional interest is often revealed not through one dramatic action, but through repeated small choices that gradually become impossible to ignore. There is also another layer that can make this kind of attraction confusing. Sometimes a person is not simply responding to who someone else is. They are responding to how they feel when they are around that person. A married man may begin experiencing another woman as a reminder of a part of himself that he has not felt connected to in a long time. Perhaps he feels appreciated around her. Perhaps he feels interesting again. Perhaps he feels confident, listened to, respected, or emotionally alive. Maybe his responsibilities at home have become overwhelming. Maybe his marriage has entered a routine where conversations are mostly about schedules, bills, children, work, and obligations. None of this automatically means his marriage is bad or that his partner has failed him. Human relationships naturally move through different seasons, but when emotional needs remain unspoken for a long time, attention from someone outside the relationship can suddenly feel unusually powerful. The other woman can become connected in his mind with a version of himself he misses. He may start thinking, consciously or unconsciously, I like who I am when I am around her, and that distinction is important. Sometimes the attraction is not only about the other person, it is about the emotional state she seems to awaken inside him. He may associate her presence with freedom, excitement, recognition, youthfulness, confidence, or being understood. That can make the connection feel deeper than it actually is. And this is where projection can enter the picture. He may place hopes, unmet needs, and forgotten parts of himself onto someone who has simply made him feel seen. The feeling can be real, while the interpretation of that feeling can still be mistaken. So what does this mean for you if you are the woman noticing the change? First, it means you do not have to immediately label every subtle signal. You can observe without becoming consumed by interpretation. You can notice the difference without allowing that difference to define your reality. If his communication becomes warmer, notice it. If he seeks you out more often, notice it. If he seems unusually attentive, notice it. But do not build an entire emotional story around a glance or a compliment. Sometimes people are simply friendly, sometimes they are lonely, sometimes they are naturally expressive, sometimes they are attracted, and sometimes several of these things are happening at once. The healthiest approach is to look at the larger pattern while staying grounded in your own boundaries. This is especially important when the person involved is married. Emotional chemistry can feel exciting, flattering, and deeply validating, but it can also become confusing very quickly. You may begin waiting for messages, replaying conversations, wondering what his silence means, or searching for hidden meaning in every interaction. That is the moment to pause. Because the most important question is not only, does he feel something? The deeper question is, what is he actually willing and able to do with those feelings? Attraction is one thing, responsibility is another. A person can feel a powerful emotional pull and still choose to respect the commitments they have made. In fact, that choice tells you far more about their character than the attraction itself. So if you notice these signs, do not rush, watch, listen, stay centered. Sometimes the clearest answer appears when you stop trying to force one. And here is the part many people overlook. Emotional attraction often grows in the spaces where boundaries become unclear. A private conversation becomes normal. A personal message becomes routine. A small secret is created, then another. Suddenly, two people have a connection that neither one openly defined, yet both can feel. This is why subtle emotional boundaries matter. If he begins sharing things with you that he no longer shares with his spouse, if he turns to you first when he feels stressed, if he constantly seeks your approval, or if your conversations become something he deliberately hides, the situation has moved beyond simple friendliness. Secrecy changes the meaning of an interaction. So does emotional dependence. And this is where you have to protect your own clarity. You do not need to become cold. You do not need to punish him. You do not need to pretend you feel nothing. But you also do not need to participate in a connection that requires confusion to survive. A healthy connection does not need deception to feel meaningful. If a married man genuinely recognizes that he has developed feelings, then his responsibility is to deal honestly with his own situation rather than quietly creating a second emotional relationship on the side. That decision belongs to him. Your responsibility is to decide what you are willing to participate in. Never confuse someone's emotional uncertainty with a promise. Never mistake attention for commitment. And never allow another person's unresolved marriage to become the place where your own emotional peace disappears. The strongest position is not to chase clarity from someone who is conflicted. It is to remain clear within yourself. Sometimes the most revealing sign is not what he says when he is close to you. It is what he does when he thinks you are not paying attention. Does he look for you when he enters a room? Does his mood change when you arrive? Does he remember small details about you without being reminded? Does he find unnecessary reasons to continue conversations? Does he become unusually aware of how you respond to him? These behaviors can suggest emotional interest, but again, they should be viewed as pieces of a larger pattern rather than absolute proof. Human behavior is complicated. There is no single gesture that can tell you exactly what exists inside another person's mind. What you can observe is consistency, effort, attention, and boundaries. And perhaps the most important thing you can observe is whether his behavior respects the reality of his situation. Because genuine emotional maturity does not simply ask, what do I feel? It also asks, what impact will my actions have? That is the difference between an emotion and a choice. Feelings can appear without permission. Choices require responsibility. A married man may unexpectedly feel drawn towards someone else. That does not automatically make him cruel, dishonest, or incapable of love. But what he does after recognizing those feelings matters enormously. Does he create distance and reflect on what is missing in his own life? Does he communicate honestly with his spouse? Does he maintain appropriate boundaries? Or does he quietly nurture the connection because it feels good? Those paths lead to very different outcomes. And if you are the woman on the receiving end of his attention, you deserve to remember this distinction. You are not responsible for solving feelings that belong to another person. You are not required to become his emotional escape, and you do not have to accept uncertainty simply because the chemistry feels powerful. In the end, the quietest signs can sometimes reveal the biggest emotional shifts, but they should never become an excuse to ignore reality. A lingering look may mean attraction. A warm message may mean interest. A personal compliment may reveal increased attention. But none of these things by themselves tell you what someone will choose to do, and that is the real story beneath all of this. Attraction can happen unexpectedly. Emotional needs can surface in surprising places. People can become fascinated by someone who makes them feel seen, understood, or alive again. But emotional maturity begins when a person stops simply following the feeling and starts examining it. What is missing? What is being projected? What is being avoided? What responsibility comes with this emotion? Those questions matter more than any smile, message, or lingering glance. So if you find yourself wondering whether a married man has started looking at you differently, slow down and observe the whole picture. Do not dismiss your intuition, but do not let intuition become imagination either. Stay grounded, keep your boundaries visible. Let his actions reveal his intentions over time. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all. You do not chase. You do not force a confession. You do not create a secret world and then hope he chooses it. You simply remain steady and allow reality to reveal itself. And if there is something genuine beneath the surface, clarity will eventually have to replace ambiguity. Until then, protect your peace. Because being noticed can feel wonderful, but being respected is far more valuable. And that is the difference worth remembering. It means you need to move carefully because you are not simply receiving attention anymore. You may be receiving emotional meaning. Without realizing it, you can begin stepping into the role of an emotional mirror, a trusted confidant, or even a quiet emotional refuge. And once someone starts placing that kind of meaning on you, the connection can become much more complicated than it first appeared. Another important signal is the increasing contact and the emotional routine that develops around it. In the beginning, it may seem harmless. He asks questions that don't really need to be asked. He finds small reasons to message you. He sends an article, a funny picture, a quote, or some random thought just to keep the conversation alive. None of these actions seem important by themselves. But then they happen again and again. Slowly, those little moments become a pattern. They create a routine, and that routine is not really about information or practical communication. It is about emotional anchoring. He starts looking for your response. He notices how quickly you answer. He pays attention to whether your messages sound warm or distant. He may even change his behavior according to your mood. And without noticing it, your place in his emotional world begins getting larger. But something else can happen at the same time. You may begin changing too. You check your phone more often. You notice when his name appears. You feel a small burst of excitement when he reaches out. You become curious about his mood, his day, and whether something is wrong. This is the point where you need to pay attention because the connection may no longer be simple friendliness. It may be becoming emotional dependence. And this is where the story can quietly change direction. The danger is not necessarily physical. Sometimes the deeper risk is emotional fusion. Two people can become deeply connected without ever crossing an obvious physical boundary. They can become dependent on each other's attention, reassurance, and emotional presence. If neither person stops to examine what is happening, the bond can begin influencing decisions before either person realizes it. There is an important psychological truth here. What remains unexamined can quietly begin directing our behavior. You may tell yourself that you are only talking. He may tell himself that you are only friends. You may both believe there is nothing serious happening. But if the emotional connection continues growing in private, eventually your choices may begin revolving around it. You might start wondering when he will message next. He may start looking for your reaction before making a decision. You may feel disappointed when he becomes distant. He may become unsettled when you pull back. And suddenly, something that started with a few casual conversations has become an emotional thread running through both of your days. That is why awareness matters. You have to recognize the pattern while it is still small. Because once emotional dependency becomes established, stepping back can feel much harder than anyone expected. You may wake up one day and realize that a bond you never consciously chose has become part of your emotional life. And here is the part many people miss. Emotional attachment does not always announce itself. Sometimes it arrives disguised as ordinary conversation. Sometimes it sounds like friendship. Sometimes it feels like being understood. Keep watching the pattern, because the small signs often reveal what the big words never say. Even the humor between you can begin changing. The jokes become more playful. The teasing becomes more personal. He may give you a nickname that no one else uses. You may develop private references or little jokes that only the two of you understand. These things can seem innocent, but repeated private language can create a sense of exclusivity. It creates a small world that feels separate from everyone else, and that matters, because language does more than communicate information. It can build emotional closeness. When two people develop a private way of speaking, they can begin feeling as though there is something special that belongs only to them. The most revealing part may be that he does not communicate this way with everyone. His tone changes around you. His attention changes. His personality may become more playful, open, or emotionally expressive. That does not automatically prove romantic attraction, but it can show that the relationship has become personally significant to him. He is no longer simply exchanging information. He is creating connection. And when that connection is repeated over time and supported by emotional attention, attachment can begin forming. You may find yourself caught between excitement and discomfort, between feeling flattered and feeling uncertain. Part of you may enjoy being noticed. Another part may wonder where this is going. And that conflict is important because sometimes you can feel the direction of a relationship before you understand the reason for it. Maybe he doesn't even know exactly what he wants. Maybe he is simply responding to how safe and understood he feels around you. But whether he can name it or not, you can still feel the emotional weight of it. And once you notice that weight, pretending nothing is happening becomes much harder. Before anything obvious happens, there is usually language. There is attention, there is repeated presence. There are small conversations that slowly become longer conversations. There are messages that begin as ordinary and gradually become personal. This is often where an emotional affair can begin, not through one dramatic moment, but through a series of small choices that slowly create closeness. That is why the earliest stage can be so difficult to recognize. Nothing looks dramatic. Nobody announces that a boundary has been crossed, yet something is changing underneath the surface. And now you have to ask yourself a deeper question. Am I participating in a story I consciously chose, or am I slowly becoming part of a story that someone else is creating around me? Think about that carefully, because by the time casual glances become consistent attention and simple conversations become emotional routines, the connection may no longer feel accidental. It has a rhythm, it has expectation, it has emotional momentum. And even when nothing physical has happened, something powerful may already be developing: emotional intimacy. This is the stage many people never see coming, not because they are foolish or unaware, but because emotional intimacy often arrives wearing a very gentle disguise. It feels like kindness. It feels like trust. It feels like warmth. It feels like finally being understood. But underneath that warmth can exist unmet needs, emotional projection, loneliness, and a longing for connection that neither person has fully examined. This is why you cannot judge the situation only by how pleasant it feels. Sometimes what feels comforting in the moment can become complicated later. At first, his messages may simply become more personal. He stops talking only about work or everyday matters. He starts telling you small things about his life, how his night went, what has been on his mind, something stressful that happened during the day, a disagreement at home, a frustration he has been carrying. Maybe he says he has been feeling dissatisfied, but he cannot explain exactly why. And you listen. Of course you listen. You are empathetic. You care. His openness makes you feel trusted. Something about his vulnerability may even touch your own experiences. Perhaps you have also felt overlooked at times. Perhaps you understand what it feels like to have emotions that nobody seems to notice. So the conversation becomes easier. He feels safe talking to you, and gradually you begin feeling safe talking to him too. That is when the emotional space between you can become powerful. He may begin treating you as the place where he can finally say what he cannot say elsewhere. You become the person he contacts when he is stressed, the person whose opinion matters, the person whose response can change his mood. And slowly, without signing any agreement, you may find yourself carrying an emotional role you never intended to accept. You are no longer simply a friend or colleague, you are becoming an emotional anchor. And that role can feel deeply meaningful because being trusted feels good. Being needed feels powerful. But being needed and being loved are not always the same thing. Remember that distinction. It can save you from confusing emotional dependence with genuine commitment. Sometimes he may say things like, "I have never told anyone this before," or "I feel like I can really be myself with you." Those words can feel beautiful. They can make you feel uniquely important. And perhaps the emotion behind them is completely genuine. But genuine emotion does not automatically mean healthy circumstances. The problem is not necessarily that his feelings are fake. The problem is what those feelings are asking you to become. If he increasingly depends on you to feel understood, calm, valued, or emotionally complete, you may slowly become responsible for feelings that are not yours to manage. That is an unfair position. Emotional dependency can feel incredibly intense because it is often built around secrecy, contrast, and emotional escape. You become the person who feels different from the rest of his life. Around you, he may feel lighter. He may feel heard. He may feel interesting again. He may feel like a version of himself that has been buried beneath years of routine and responsibility. That intensity can easily be mistaken for proof that the connection must be special or destined. But intensity does not always equal compatibility. Sometimes intensity simply reveals unmet needs. There is a major difference between connection that exists in freedom and connection that grows inside ambiguity. Healthy emotional connection can withstand honesty and clarity. Emotional dependency often needs uncertainty to continue. He may not want to hurt his spouse. He may not even think of himself as someone who would betray a relationship. Yet he may still keep returning to you because your attention gives him something he feels he is missing. And suddenly you are placed in the middle of an emotional problem you did not create. Over time, you may notice the effect this connection is having on you. You start waiting for his messages, you check your phone more often than usual. His voice stays in your thoughts after the conversation ends. Your mood changes depending on whether he gives you attention. A normal day feels slightly less interesting when he is quiet. You begin wondering what he is doing, whether he is thinking about you, and why his behavior changed. This is how emotional merging can happen. Not through one dramatic declaration, but through repetition. Through constant communication, through vulnerability, through becoming part of each other's daily emotional routine. And once someone becomes part of your emotional landscape, creating distance can feel surprisingly difficult. You may tell yourself you can stop any time, but then another message arrives, another conversation begins, another moment of understanding pulls you back into the same pattern. This is why awareness is so important. You have to notice not only what he is doing, but what the connection is doing to you. Are you becoming more peaceful or more anxious? More grounded or more preoccupied? More clear or more confused? Those questions tell you something important, because a connection can feel emotionally beautiful and still be unhealthy for your life. It can feel meaningful and still place you in a role you never agreed to take. And if you begin realizing that your emotional state depends on another person's attention, pause, step back mentally, give yourself space to see the situation without the emotional fog. You do not have to deny what you feel. You simply have to stop letting the feeling make every decision for you.